Connecting the Dots with Jared and
Tim. It's me. That's my name.
Today we're going to flip roles, and I'm going to be the host, I guess, per se today, because Tim has a lot of exciting news.
I do. I have a lot of exciting news.
Which is?
One hand.
The Rangers won the World Series.
Yes.
Because we haven't done a podcast since then.
Yes, that is correct. The
That is
Rangers
his news.
won. That's my big news. And I just love how they really won the game that they did.
What sport was it, Tim?
Baseball.
Hey, I'm actually impressed.
I know that much. All I know about Texas, Dallas localized sports is, and I'm okay to get hate for this because I don't watch sports. So
Yeah,
I'm speaking to
the non-sports crowd.
yeah. The stereotype I always hear with Dallas sports is Cowboys never win, and we have very loud fans. Rangers have been similar. Mavericks 2012 was a great year.
Yeah.
And that was the one year I loved sport. I watched that was a great summer.
Yeah, it was.
Me and my family, we were remodeling the house, and we had the TV set up on a unfurnished living room, and we'd watch on the floor.
That's fun.
Dirk Nowitzki and JJ Barea, is that correct?
Yeah.
All the oh my gosh, it was so cool. And he had a fever in the last game.
Yes,
even,
he did. Yeah.
and it was just like what?
Yeah.
So there was a period that I was
He just fever dreamed his way to the championship.
yeah. But
The Stars are pretty good, which is hockey.
yes, I knew that I was hockey.
Yeah. FC Dallas they made the playoffs. They lost in the first round. The thing about I've learned, and I know this is a theology podcast or a church podcast, we're going sports here, which you know absolutely nothing about.
And I'm trying, yeah.
Yeah. But like most DFW sports will typically make the playoffs and then lose in the first round.
Right, like we get really close.
Yeah. It's just these giant teases of like the Mavs have two of the best players in the NBA right now. And last year we had the same two guys and we didn't make the playoffs. But we should make the playoffs this year. But the reality is unless we add somebody, we're not gonna go past maybe the second round. I think we can get to the second round.
Yeah.
The Stars could go back to they went to the finals last year, not to the Stanley Cup, but to like our conference finals and lost. They still have a good chance of redoing that. The Cowboys look great, but they've only beaten up on crappy teams, and every time they play a winning team, they've lost.
Interesting.
So like I am just as a diehard Cowboy fan, I don't drink the Kool-Aid. Like I keep it real and understand that hey, the Cowboys are really good, and they are really good.
Yeah.
They literally had a guy break a defensive player scored his 5th touchdown of the year, which is an NFL record of all time. Like no defensive player has scored 5 times in a year.
Yeah.
And so like there's a lot of big things that you can look forward to as a Cowboy fan, but the next 5 weeks, 4 out of the next 5 weeks are playing teams that all have winning records. So in 5 weeks, when December ends and we kind of get back in our groove after the Christmas break, then ask me what's going on and see if they're still good.
Right.
Yeah.
Now that's clearly very exciting for me.
Yes.
But not as exciting as the fact that I'm engaged
Boom!
to my wonderful fiance. Should I say ex-girlfriend? Because she's no longer my girlfriend, but now my fiance.
I wouldn't.
That's wise, and I don't think she would find that funny. For at least in the instant of hearing it, I think later she'd find it funny. But
Yeah.
regardless, my fiance, Caitlin, and I have been enjoying that so far. And also, this was the second time I got to preach.
Yes.
To the whole congregation. We've had a practice round or two of preaching before to a small crowd. But, that was this Sunday, and that was exciting to prepare for, exciting to do, and very relieving to be done.
Yeah. So which is why we kind of flipped the script this week, because I'm going to ask you some wonderful questions, and I know you, like you said, you're probably going to throw some back at me. But preaching is one of those things that, we talked today. People go, oh, this person's a preacher, but they're a teacher and not a preacher and all this jazz or whatever. and we won't get to the minutia of that because sometimes that's just personal preference and style is basically what I've learned. If people are like, well, that person's a teacher, not really a preacher, it's mostly because they like a certain style of preaching.
Right.
And if you don't preach the way they think that you should, they just declare you as a teacher.
Yeah.
And we can get the minutia of all that on a different podcast. But today, just as a young guy, as a young preacher, because you are still young, even though you don't have hair.
Yes.
The beard gives you wisdom.
I pray it does.
What does it look like, or what some difficulties you experienced as somebody who, like you said, this is only the second time you've preached to the entire congregation.
Right.
So you've preached before, right? You as a student minister, you preach to the students all the time. But what is some difficulties? I guess the first question should be like, what is the difference prep time between a whole congregation where you have lots of ages, generations, demographics, things like that, and then your student ministry?
Yes. So I think prep time, just on a very simple point of it, prep time is larger when you're going to speak before the whole congregation. And I would say, especially earlier on when I was learning how to teach the students themselves, initially it was a lot of study and prep and over studying and over prepping for what would be a normal Wednesday night lesson. But now with a student Wednesday night, I can hash it out in an afternoon, be set and done, give good examples, all sorts of stuff to help them where they're at. And with students specifically, and this translates to preaching to a congregation as well, but it's just more diverse.
Yeah.
But with students, I try to make a habit of telling them or showing them that, hey, I presume that most of you aren't believers. And unless you tell me otherwise, and we work through that and I see the fruit and can affirm that and encourage you in that, I start with the presumption with them of they always need to hear the gospel.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I think Scripture shows the gospel in almost every page. Not that I want to retroactively force Christ into passages where he is not more clear. You know what I mean? Like if we're talking about Joseph and his brothers, I'm not going to say, and this was a symbol of Christ.
Yeah.
But you can extract the gospel message.
Yeah.
Still, you know, to love the Lord, to believe in the Lord, to walk with the Lord in any passage. But with the students, I'm thinking with my teacher background from education. That's what my degree is education. And so when I prep with them in mind, it's kind of like what challenges do we face in terms of attention?
Yeah.
And
okay.
relatability. Yeah. So I want to teach them new words. Like a big word that I think every Christian should know is sanctification or justification. And we take time to unpack that a little bit more with students.
Yeah.
And I've got time with them to do that. But I've also got to keep in mind there's a 7-second attention span with kids especially.
Yeah.
And so all that to say, when I cater to the students and meet them where they're at, it's going to be different than the congregation. Because in the congregation, I'm also thinking there are people who have known the gospel their whole life for I don't know how many years, and they've been growing in it that whole time. There are people who are older who don't know the gospel as well, or they have a very simple understanding of it.
Yeah.
And for any age range, that can be the case. I have to prepare in mind for the person who has a lot of questions, a lot of doubts. I have to prepare for the person who doesn't have a lot of questions and doubts, but they need to be encouraged still. They need to be evangelized to, even if they know the gospel already.
Yeah.
And of course, if you got a Sunday where kids are in there as well, not just the middle and high school students, but little ones.
Yeah.
You gotta learn to speak simply still,
Yeah.
so that they can grab onto something.
Which I will say, in our context, our children's ministry does like a crossword that keeps them kind of engaged. So we as whoever is preaching that week has to send the children's ministry certain words that we know we're going to say, and they turn to a crossword. So it kind of helps that instance of how do we engage with the younger kids, keep their attention span. So
Yeah, and I would say, just for my 2 times trying this to the whole congregation,
Yeah.
it's a lot of prep time.
yeah. How many hours did you spend?
I think in study alone, not even writing out my script or manuscript, or finding what I think are good application points.
Yeah.
I think study alone, and that means context. That means looking at resources or helpful aids, listening to other sermons on that subject or passage.
Yeah.
I spent maybe 20 to 30 hours.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Just on that alone.
Yeah.
And that's not because I think I want to clarify, at the very foundation of any teaching, I believe it should change the person who's going to teach it first.
Yeah.
So for me, whether it's with students or in preparation for congregation, there is a very real effort that I want to meet on my own part to not just acquire information, but to be challenged by this as well. And so, depending on the subject or passage, I might have had a lot of that experience already. So like if I was to teach on the passage Romans 8:12-13,
Yeah.
I've had a lot of time before preaching or even teaching.
Yeah.
I've spent with that.
Yeah.
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 And so I might spend less time researching and filling up on other sermons and stuff.
Yeah. Like when we do certain passages, I would definitely say, especially if it's a passage that I've already preached, it definitely won't take me as long. I don't ever recycle sermons.
No.
Personally, I know there's a lot of people who do. Like I save all my sermons, just because if somebody's sick or someone's in a pinch, you never know when you are called on. So it is nice to have outlines or manuscripts ready to roll just in case that if you get called upon, boom, you're ready. I know for you and I that's different because I've been doing it for not that much longer, but a little bit longer. And so trying to save those things and not reply. But I think you're right in the instance of it's something that we have done a ton of. I am a little bit easier or feel a little bit more comfortable going into certain conversations and texts than others.
Yeah.
Like if you said, go preach a sermon on Song of Solomon right now, I'd be like, let me figure that out. But if you're like, go preach on James, I'd be like, cool, got it. Yeah. I don't even know if I need to prep at this point. That's being facetious, but at the same time, I could walk up on stage.
Yeah, if it was an on the spot, I'd be
fine.
You'd be better prepared than otherwise.
Yeah, one of my favorite sermons on Ephesians is from Francis Chan.
On Ephesians or James?
Ephesians.
Okay.
I know that's a switch there, but on Ephesians. And I was listening to it on a podcast. And the beginning of it, Francis Chan walks up on stage because it's at a conference, and he's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to preach today. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And so he goes, we're going to spend 10 minutes in prayer. So he makes everybody spend like 10 minutes in prayer, and he's praying. He gets up and he goes, so turn to Ephesians and just wait. And I thought it was one of the most fantastic sermons that I've heard from the book of Ephesians.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, he is at the time was probably in his late 40s. He's been
doing this for a while,
30 plus years at this point. So for him, like there is just that 30 years of study and practice and prayer, and so there is just this difference as we're in the sense of like you and I that are still really young in this. It is going to take a lot more time.
Absolutely, and I think even a good point to note. I want to practice this. What I'm about to say is, even if I think I'm very familiar and well caught up in a passage. John 3:16 is a good example. I want to still research and study so that I'm not having tunnel vision.
Yep.
You know, I'm not presuming that I've
Yeah.
got it figured out, because what I don't want to rob myself.
Yeah.
You know, of the depths and riches of Scripture. You know, so I would say congregation preparation is a lot more exhausting in time. That is, I say exhausting, not that it's tiring necessarily, but it takes a lot of time.
What were some difficulties that you ran into, whether it just be because of your experience or just in the unknown, as being kind of the young, because you are
25.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Are you the youngest guy? That's Levi's younger than you are.
Maybe
Only by I can't think of it right now. I think y'all are the same age. I think it's y'all are like a couple months apart, maybe, but still, like one of the youngest, if not the youngest guy that is going up on stage to preach this year. Not that that may make a difference, but like, what were some things that you've just found as like, oh, this is a little bit more difficult than I thought, or I ran into this problem here and there?
I think the biggest challenges, and part of this is comparing to when I first preached. So the first sermon I preached to the congregation was Jonah 3, and that was part of a series. We were going through Jonah, and that had its own challenges.
So that scared me.
Yeah. If you hear something, that the AC just kicked on, it's not a ghost. Only the Holy Ghost is here. I pray. But anyway, in Jonah 3, I think it was easier with Jonah 3, and I forget this. I was actually supposed to teach Jonah 1, 1 through 16 or something.
You were supposed to open.
But I was sick that week, so we shuffled the cards a little bit.
Yeah.
And I did Jonah 3. So I had like 2 weeks to prep.
Yeah.
What originally I prepped for months.
Yeah.
But that was easier to do because I was able to point back to, this is what other people throughout the series have said, and there's a continuing point, and we're taking our time through the book itself. We've spent all the time doing the context.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You didn't have to go backwards any, really.
Right. I would say the biggest challenge this time around was it was a one-off.
Yep.
Where I had the privilege and ability to pick whatever passage or topic I wanted to, and I'm glad I went with what I did. But because it's not the beginning of a book and it's actually towards the end of the book, I went with Philippians 4, 10 through 13. And the challenge for me was, okay, I've got to build all this context for the rest of the book, for who the Philippians are. And I've got to simmer down all the different applications that I could write out. I did 3 drafts of this sermon and had to whittle it down each time because I recognized I don't want to sacrifice the context, because that's very important to understanding Paul in contentment specifically.
Especially when you're hitting one of the most taken out of context verses in all the Bible.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I communicate that better? Absolutely. That's part of the note-taking and reflecting process, is how do we communicate context more effectively. But I didn't want to sacrifice that, even with my limited time. But application is so important. So in my original draft, I had 5 or 6 or 7 applications, and they were good applications, I think.
I'm just kidding. They were great. They were really good.
But
he did a phenomenal job. Just
thank you. But I had to make a conscious effort of like, okay, I won't have time to cover all of these well.
Yep.
Because this isn't a series.
Yep.
And we could, if we did a series on it, that would change
very different
how I go about the application stuff and all that. But I had to narrow it down from 7, maybe not well explained, but still true and helpful applications, down to 1 or 2. That I think, even though they were more broad speaking, and not here's what they do in this circumstance. Here's what they do in this circumstance. It was in any and all circumstance. You can't apply this application or this application and know that it will be good.
Yeah.
So I think that was a big challenge, was really sorting through, like, I've got 30, 35, I ended up going 40 minutes of what do I want, what do I think is going to be the most important thing for us to hear today.
Yeah.
And not rely on the idea of, oh, well, maybe somebody else will cover what I didn't get to pick up on next week.
Yeah.
So doing a one-off was a really
Yeah.
fun challenge.
Yeah.
But I would say that was the biggest challenge this time around, was slimming it down.
Yeah.
You know.
You want to pause real quick?
Yeah.
Let's do that.
We're gonna take a intermission. I'll be honest, I've got to go to the bathroom. But we'll be right back.
So with that, speaking about timing, as we laugh about it, so I think one of the hardest things as a preacher or a teacher is how do you handle criticism and praise, right? Because in your instance, right, the first time you preach, the second time you preach, unless you just absolutely bomb it, and most of the time, even if you do horrible, everyone's just going to give you praise. Like most people are just going to say how good you were, and like the worst thing you'll probably get is, everyone struggles the first time.
Right.
And that's probably like the worst thing you're going to get. But where Pastor Lean comes from, where people will gladly tell him what they think about his sermon, his good and his bad. And I'm starting to experience that where people feel more comfortable that they can just say whatever they want, however they want to say it. And, that's definitely difficult at times. But as somebody that is just starting out, how do you handle that fresh criticism that you've never experienced before, and just all the praise that you've probably never experienced before in that sense?
I think first it starts with the heart. Starts with a preparation of even beyond preaching specifically, receiving any kind of feedback in other fields as well. So for me, I want to first recognize that when I receive instruction, even if it's not worded well, and it comes off angry or something like that, I need to practice humility first, and recognize I am new at this, and the instruction I receive is very, very helpful, and I will be at greater disservice if I dismiss it. Even if it's something I don't agree with necessarily in that moment, I will always regret not receiving that, in light of, we're trying to help you. You have blind spots. Yeah. We got to recognize that, when I receive instruction, it's like when we're backing up a truck to load something and I can't see everything.
As we did yesterday.
Yeah, right. All those trees. Oh my word.
Yeah, Christmas decorations.
But I can only see so much.
Yeah.
I'm driving the vehicle.
Yeah.
But I can only do that as well as the people that are helping guide me do it. Now, in the moment of preaching itself, you're not going to receive instruction unless you're really doing just that bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Sundays are not the time to have sermon critique, because we're not paying attention.
Yeah. Our mind, it was so, my mind's everywhere.
Blew up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but receiving even help, like kind words.
Yeah.
I have to take with a humble spirit and recognize that's very sweet, and I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah.
But I don't want to lie to myself and think, oh, well, everything's great and cheery, I don't have to grow from this.
Yeah.
My goal is to grow, and I think having that mindset helps me handle any kind of feedback, whether positive or negative, helpful or not, sought after or,
Yeah.
or and I think that's helpful attitude with most things, preaching or not, because I want to receive things in a gracious spirit, because I'm the total benefactor of it all. With this kind of instruction, I am the one benefiting first, and it eventually will benefit others. Whether that's with students or with one-on-one interactions, like in discipleship, or just encouraging somebody, learning how to better communicate good, deep biblical truths is never something I want to pretend I'm done growing in. So I think having that mindset has helped me a ton.
Yeah.
And it's been easy to practice that when I've been at Connect in some form or fashion for going on 5 years. And most of that time I've been either an intern or staff.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of good, helpful redirection and practicing of in the teaching environment specifically of, hey, that worked, and here's why that didn't, and here's why. Yeah,
because we have since we've been on staff together. Because you were originally, when you came on staff, you were my intern,
right?
Student ministry. Well, I guess a next gen ministry, because we did students in college age, specifically, and I definitely for students every Wednesday night. As soon as you got done teaching and all the students left, our group of leaders would all sit down together and we would go through whoever taught that night. What was it, like 6 to 8 of us, if not more, would sit down and go through your teaching and say, hey, this was a good example. Hey, this was or was not clear. And sometimes it was hard to sit and go, hey, tonight was really, really good. And that was the easy ones, or the difficult ones where it was, hey, you brought this and either you completely missed it, which sometimes I know for me, y'all have had those conversations with me where y'all went, hey, this was the thing you were shooting for and you didn't hit it.
Right.
And I remember like having to fight even in those moments, go like, ooh, like I did a good job. And the reality was, hey, if the other adults didn't understand it, how do you think a teenager understood it?
Exactly.
And then on Sunday morning, like having to sit through that, because we still do that. You and I still do that. We did that yesterday where we kind of walked through your sermon and said, hey, here was the good and here was the bad and here's where some areas are to grow. And it's also hard, but it's hard as receiving the critique because you want to be like, well, you're not perfect either.
Right.
But it's easier for like me to find some things because I go, oh, I see that because I also struggle with that. And so I understand where you're coming from. And so it's still difficult because it is, everyone says don't take it personally, but it is personal. Like you spent 20, 30 hours prepping for 30, 45 minutes. And for someone to go, oh, that didn't go so well, it's hard.
Yeah.
But it's necessary.
Absolutely. And there's a very real reality to this is a form of spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
You know? It's us dying to ourselves, dying to our pride, addressing in ourselves what is hurting in this comment. Is that to my pride?
Yeah.
Or is it like actually baseless?
Yeah. And
the only way you're going to know that is by seeking out that accountability and word from others. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And by testing that to the word, you know? So no, it's spiritual warfare on our end as well. We have to examine our hearts, when we receive positive or negative instruction.
Yeah. And the desire behind this episode is specifically to help you as the individual understand. One, we get the comment quite a bit, like, what do you actually do? How much does it really take to prep a sermon?
You'll just flip open the Bible and that's it, right?
And the reality is, it's in a specific week. Like if we just took the Monday to Thursday those are kind of the 4 days we work in this sense past Sunday. On top of our normal duties, we're adding on the 20-ish hours to prep for a sermon. And that doesn't include the previous prep that we may have done the week prior, because I'll say for me, I try to start a week before, 2 weeks before, if not earlier than that. So it is just a lot of work that comes into play. And so when we go up on a Sunday morning, like, it is an outpouring of the efforts we've put into and prayed over. And it's not just a simple thing. And we want to connect the Sunday to the rest of the week where, if you wonder, hey, what are they doing this week? It's probably getting prepped to help grow you. And we typically put ourselves in situations where we have to practice it that week. Or I don't know if you ever feel like this. If we're talking about sin, like a specific sin, whether it be anger or lust or giving or discontentment, like that week is the roughest week of your life.
Yes.
Like I don't know why. I don't know if it's because you're hyper focused on it, or because God's like, hey, you need to put this into practice.
Yeah.
Or the devil's like, hey, let me just screw with you a little bit. But whatever when it comes to sin or a specific topic, a lot of times that's the struggle for the week, and it's so miserable.
Absolutely. But isn't it such a wonderful trial when applied rightly, when grown rightly, when we're being molded.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Because I really, every time I prepare to preach or teach something, whether it's in practice or we're actually going to go do it, I always benefit from it. If you get the privilege to teach a class and it's your first time teaching a Bible class, don't waste the opportunity to let it challenge and grow yourself. So I took this whole month, starting late October, to read a lot about Christian contentment. There was a specific book I started. I didn't finish it. I'm a slow reader, trying to chew on my thoughts. But it was by a Puritan named Jeremiah Burroughs in the 1600s, called The Rare Jewel of Christian Contentment. And it was very convicting. It was very challenging. And so I had to recognize, oh, my word, this month is going to be hard, because now I'm examining myself. I don't want to go up on stage and tell people to do something or encourage people to do something if I have not practiced it myself or been challenged by it myself. So, no, absolutely.
Yeah. So we hope that this has been helpful. I hope this is just another way to see how you can connect the dots. So we will see you later.
Thanks for joining us.